Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're reviewing the newest album from Fall Out Boy, Mania. Alright folks, it's the first full album review of 2018, and before I get started with the review, I just want to ask you guys, as you can maybe tell if you've seen some of my old videos, I have a bit of a new background going here, and pretty much I'm just testing out this location as far as filming goes. To see if I prefer it to my other filming location. The old one isn't necessarily going away, but if you happen to prefer this location here that I am filming in front of now compared to my old one, or if you don't really care, please leave it down in the comments down below which one you prefer, if you have anything you'd like to say about that. And based on what you say, as well as my own experience filming here, hopefully in this review, maybe we can have some changes concerning where I'm filming during some of these reviews, which would be possibly beneficial to the channel. So yeah, if you would do that, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that said, let's get started with this Fall Out Boy review for Mania. When it comes to new albums that I go into, I always hope that they're going to be good. Mostly because, given that I review stuff here on the channel, I have to listen to projects multiple times. And if it's a bad project, I still have to listen to it multiple times, regardless of how bad it is. I just don't want that to be the case, because obviously I don't like listening to bad music. I'd rather it be a good project that I can listen to over and over again and then be able to review it. But there are some projects that I don't expect to be good going into them, just given early singles and just other stuff going on prior to the release of the album. Sometimes my expectations can be lowered, and that was kind of the case with Mania. Just given that I wasn't a big fan of some of the singles from this thing, as well as the whole delay that this album went. I made a video track review for Hyungs and Menace, the lead single from this thing, as well as a video discussing that whole delay and why I wasn't a particularly big fan of some of the stuff that they did during that time, which are linked in the description down below if you want to check those out. I greatly appreciate it if you would do that, if you want more Fall Out Boy related content that I've made. But my expectations for this thing weren't exactly super high, despite being a Fall Out Boy fan. But coming into this thing and listening to it, I have to say that this is, at least in my own opinion, my least favorite Fall Out Boy album to date. And really, it just kind of confirmed a lot of the things I kind of suspected that this album would be. And overall, the sound of this project is, going more for a pop rock sound, which Fall Out Boy have been doing for the past couple of years on their last couple albums. And to an extent, they've always had a pop influenced sound in all their music before. But this album in particular is the poppiest record that they've put out to date, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, of course. There's plenty of great pop records out there, but this one isn't quite a good one, in my opinion. For starters, Hyungs and Menace, I still hate this track. I'm going to just be completely honest. My opinions on it haven't really changed since last March when I first heard the track and reviewed it. And, if you saw my worst songs of 2017 list, it ranked pretty highly on that list. And, yeah, I just don't like this song. I think the drop is incredibly annoying, incredibly grating, just impossible for me to get through. Sometimes after listening to this song, I need to take a break before I continue on with the rest of the album, just because it's just that unpleasant for me to listen to. I just don't like this song at all. Maybe you like it, and I'm happy you can get enjoyment out of it, but I'm not one of those people. As far as Champion, the second single goes, it's the only other one of the singles I heard prior to this album. And I didn't do a track review of it because I was busy. I don't remember specifically with what, but I was. That's all I remember. And this track, it's significantly better than Hyungs and Menace. I'll give it that. It's probably one of the better songs here on this project. But it's still not a super interesting track in my opinion. It kind of goes for a sort of big anthemic type sound to it, kind of like tracks like Centuries and Irresistible. And My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark from some of their past couple records. And I do like all three of those songs I mentioned to varying degrees. But, Champion, while it is one of the stronger songs on this album, I feel, it still kind of just sounds like a worse version of those songs. And it's just kind of forgettable, because when I listen to this, I'm kind of like, okay, this is fine, but why would I listen to this when I can go listen to Irresistible, which I like a significant amount more. And really, much of the tracks on this album aren't, painful to listen to or anything like Hyungs and Menace was, but most of them just kind of go for a pretty standard kind of pop rock sound that you would expect kind of from a pop rock album in 2018. It kind of sounds like Imagine Dragons trying to be Fall Out Boy. And what I really mean by that is it kind of has the boring pop rock sound that the most recent material from Imagine Dragons has. mixed with kind of the lyrics of Fall Out Boy. And if you're a Fall Out Boy fan, you're probably familiar with their lyrics. Do have a particular sound and structure to them. It just kind of sounds like Imagine Dragons really trying hard to be Fall Out Boy on this thing. And I am a fan of both of those bands to an extent, more so Fall Out Boy than Imagine Dragons, but you know, the more recent material from both bands I haven't quite been a big fan of, and this kind of sounds like the worst of it being mashed together, which isn't great in my opinion. There are times on this thing where Patrick Stump's vocals just sound very overproduced and very just, you know, just too overdone, I guess you could say. And he's a good singer. I think he's a pretty good singer. I could tell from his solo album as well as his previous work with Fall Out Boy that the guy can sing. So there's really no reason for people to be, you know, manipulating it to get it to be this super clean, super overproduced sound that it has here on this project, because it just doesn't do his voice any favors in my opinion. I feel like his voice is at its best when it's just kind of left to be its own, you know, kind of powerful thing. But here on this album, he's kind of stripped of that in all this overproduction that this album has going for it. And, you know, this is especially grating over tracks where the instrumentation is a bit more organic sounding. It just doesn't really work all that well in my opinion. Another thing about this album that I found particularly interesting was that there's two versions of the track listing, and not just like in the sense that maybe one or two tracks is moved around like I occasionally see between some digital and physical releases, but here between the physical and digital releases of this thing, the two track lists are pretty much completely different from one another. The only thing that's, you know, really similar is the closing track on it, which is the same, but the rest of the tracks are all, you know, mixed up to some degree. And the thing is, I really can't tell why they did this, aside from like an aesthetic purpose, I guess, because it doesn't really benefit the album in any way. It doesn't really hurt the album in any way. It's just different for the sake of being different. And the thing about the flow of this album is, it doesn't, you know, the tracks really don't flow into each other or anything like that. It's really an album that I feel like you could hit the shuffle button on, and, you know, it'll just kind of go about, you know, the same way as if you were to listen to the album as it was supposed to be listened to, or, you know, either of the two ways it was supposed to be listened to. You know, none of the tracks sound particularly bad, you know, coming after each other. It's not like it flows terribly or anything like that, or it sounds disjointed or anything. But it doesn't, you know, flow into each other or flow nicely or anything quite like that. The only thing kind of going for it is that the closing track, which is the same on both versions, like I said before, does kind of have a closing track type sound to it, in that I just feel like it kind of wraps up the project to some extent. And I do feel like it is one of the stronger tracks on the album. It's not, you know, super great or anything like that. I feel like it's pretty standard overall. But yeah, I do definitely appreciate that it does kind of provide a closing to this project in both versions of the track listing. And I'm happy that the band were at least smart enough to put this thing as the closing song in both versions here. But aside from that, if you were to take any of the other songs here on the album and hit shuffle, I feel like you'd kind of get a similar feel than if you were to be listening to it either of the two ways it's supposed to be listened to. Another one of my least favorite tracks on this thing is the track Sunshine Riptide, which goes for this more trap or modern hip-hop oriented sound in the instrumentation, which I just feel like is going to be really dated in a few years. I mean, it's still significantly better than Young and Menace, which was dated the day it came out, because like dubstep hasn't been a really relevant genre since like 2013 or 2014. Whereas, you know, this at least sounds relevant, but it probably won't be in a couple years. But yes, it's still not a good song in my opinion. It's still my least favorite track out of the new ones I heard going into this album. The lyrics on this album are also probably some of the worst that Fall Out Boy have ever made, really. I mean, this one in particular stood out to me, if you don't mind me reading it aloud. This is from the track Stay Frosty, Royal Milk Tea, and the lyric in particular comes on the chorus of the track, which is, I testify if I die in my sleep, then know that my life was just a killer dream. Like, no, Fall Out Boy, no, that's not clever. On this album, it just sounds like Fall Out Boy are trying to make a pop album for people who think that they're too good for pop music. Because really a lot of the lyrics on this thing just kind of go off, you know, like many Fall Out Boy albums do, into these kind of crazy, you know, tangents and metaphors and things like that, which in the past have managed to work. But here on this thing, they just, you know, end up sounding really corny, or they just don't really add up and just sound a bit ridiculous when said. And it just feels like it's trying to make it sound like there's more to these lyrics than there actually is. Hence, you know, pop music for people who think that they're too good for pop music. I'd much prefer something that just is a bit more straightforward with what it's trying to say, especially if there's not much to it, than this, which is pretty much just, you know, making a mountain out of a molehill, except that there really isn't even a molehill to begin with. But overall, I'd have to say that Mania is, well, once again, in my opinion, my least favorite Fall Out Boy album to date. The worst album that they've put out so far. Just mostly because I really don't feel that this is an album I'm going to come back to in any way. With all of their previous albums, even though I've liked them to varying degrees, I feel like there's something there to come back to or something interesting about them, which this album just really doesn't have. I feel like you could interchange this with a wide array of pop albums that have been released in recent times, particularly albums that came from like rock bands trying to make pop albums. I know that was a thing that happened in 2017 a lot, and this kind of feels like it's a leftover of that. But, you know, out of all those albums, this one included, I just feel like it's interchangeable with much of the others. It's just not a very interesting album all the way through. It's not quite as painful to listen to as I thought it might be, given that Young and Menace was the lead single from this thing. But, you know, the majority of the tracks on this thing, like I said, they're not painful to listen to, but they're not interesting, really. Like, I have no reason to come back to them. Like Champion, for example. Like, I don't feel a reason to come back to that song, even though it's one of the stronger songs on here, because I just rather listen to a track like Irresistible, which I just feel like is a lot better of a track. It kind of occupies the same sort of sound and style. Overall, I feel like that this album's greatest defense is just being really boring, because there's not much to this thing that really stands out, and it's just really fortunate that it's only 10 tracks and like 35 minutes in length, because any more than that, and it just would have been a real pain to get through. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend this just because I personally didn't enjoy it all too much. If you happen to enjoy this thing, which I'm certain that some people will, you know, I'm happy that someone at least out there was able to get enjoyment out of this thing, even though I couldn't. Yeah, if you enjoyed this review, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future album reviews and other music-related content, discussion videos, countdown lists, things of that sort. Comment down below your thoughts on the review, this album, and like I mentioned earlier, if you have anything you'd like to say about my new setup back here, if you like it, if you prefer the old one, make sure you leave it down in the comments down below, because given your reaction to it, I might make some changes here concerning my background on the channel. So yeah, if you want your opinion heard, leave it down in the comments down below. Follow me on all my social medias linked in the description, and check out those other Fall Out Boy videos I mentioned that are linked down there. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.